This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, okay, great. So fine. So till yesterday, we were talking about mostly around the virtual machine services, and we were looking at how to install something called as IIS on a virtual machine, and then we were saying how do you basically manage, let's say, the life cycle of a virtual machine, like taking the backup of the virtual machine, and also doing something known as an Azure site recovery, and and a couple of concepts around the virtual machines, right? Now, all these were covered under something called as infrastructure as a service. Meaning, when you said that, or when you went to Microsoft and said, you know what, I need a virtual machine, Microsoft said, okay, fine, I will give you a virtual machine, but whatever is there on top of the virtual machine, like let's say the operating system, and let's say the softwares, and let's say all the or let's say the backup and management, all of these responsibilities, like after I give you the virtual machine service, whatever is responsible whatever is, let's say, the responsibility that you need to have on top of the virtual machine should be managed by you. You as a user went ahead and you are now starting to manage all these things. So we were managing all these services over a period of time. We went ahead and installed softwares, backed up our virtual machine service. We also we also dealt with something known as a DNS system, wherein we went ahead and we added something called as a domain name to our virtual machine service and etc. And we were also configuring things like the networking and all that stuff, right? So we were doing a lot of things, and we were saying, okay, fine, virtual machine is nothing but in the backend you have a physical server. Meaning, when you're selecting a virtual machine service, or when you're selecting the region when you're creating a virtual machine service, this is nothing but the region where the data center is lying. So in my case, let's say I created a virtual machine service that is running out of a region like East US. So I'm just saying that, okay, fine, please create please create a virtual machine for me out of a physical server that is actually running from a country called, or from a region called East US. So this is what something, or this is something that used to happen. But now I'll just present you a scenario. Okay, you are, let's say, a hotel industry, and the only business driving factor for you right now as a hotel industry is that you just need a website. Okay, you need a website. You need that website to be up and running, and you need people to use that website so that they can use that website, reserve bookings to your hotel, and let's say look at pictures of your hotel and etc. Now in this case, sorry, in this case, you choose a virtual machine service and you say, okay, fine, this is a virtual machine service, and let me go ahead and install the operating system, the software, and etc. And finally, you have your code, and you install your code on top of the virtual machine service. So you take the code, you do a lot of things, and you kind of throw your code on top of this particular virtual machine service. This is good, great. Like, a lot of people are visiting your website. A lot of customers are actually visiting your website, and they are happy. They are able to book, and they're able to, let's say, go ahead and interact with your website, which is running from a virtual machine that is created in Azure. Good until this point. But as a hotel industry, my main focus is on the customer, meaning is on this particular customer who's coming here and booking this particular website, or booking the hotel, or booking, let's say, whatever, or booking whatever the services that my hotel is offering. But as a hotel industry, my main concern is not administration, meaning I don't want to spend a lot of money on, let's say, managing all these things. So money and time, very importantly time. As you have seen, this takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of knowledge in order to manage your virtual machine services in the backend. For example, let's say you want to enable the backup, you want to take, let's say, you want to do an ASR, you want to manage the DNS. So there are a lot of things that you need to manage as an administrator on the virtual machine service out here. So there are a lot of things that you need to there are a lot of things that you need to manage as, let's say, as an administrator in the backend. And if you look at all these things, you need a lot of time for this. A, you need a lot of money, and there's a lot of administration that's actually going into it. Now, one question that I want to ask you all is that imagine you are owning a hotel, you have a hotel industry. Would you be interested in your customers? Meaning, would you be interested in the quality of your code, or would you be interested in managing the entire backend infrastructure, like the operating system, patching it out, and etc.? So, what would be your answer in that way? Anyone?
Quality of the code.
Exactly right. Quality of the code. I'm not that much interested. I'm not like very interested in patching the operating systems, in maintaining and managing all these things out here, right? This is not my primary area of expertise. This is something which IT industry probably kind of needs. So I go to Microsoft and say, you know what, Microsoft, I don't like this model wherein I am managing a lot of things in the backend. And during this management, I'm spending up a lot of money because I basically I have employed a team. There's a huge team of, let's say, the developers and etc. who are continuously working and all that stuff. And I really don't like this way of management out. So I don't like the way I'm managing things out because I'm taking a lot of money. I'm taking too much of space and etc. I'm not liking this. Can you have someone manage all these things in the backend for me, like all these things, the virtual machine also, the operating system, whatever softwares that are going onto the virtual machine, also, let's say, the networking of the virtual machine, also, let's say, the DNS of the virtual machine, all these things, right? All the administration level of things. I don't want myself to go ahead and manage this out. I rather want some help from someone to go ahead and manage it out. So I come to Microsoft with this problem. Microsoft says, you know what, I have a perfect solution for it. I have a package for you wherein I will give you the virtual machine, the bottom underlying virtual machine I'll give you. I'll take care of it. I'll manage your virtual machine. Whatever is the operating system that is there in your virtual machine, forget about it. I'll take care of it. Meaning I is in virtual machine. I mean I as in Microsoft will take care of it. And and sorry, and also whatever the softwares that you need for your code to run successfully, even leave that up to me. I will take care of it. So you don't have to worry of all these things out. I will give you an entire package. You just focus upon the code. Meaning, please have a development team. Go ahead and ask them to write the code accordingly, and forget about all the backend infrastructure. And I'm talking about backend infrastructure. I'm talking about management of the infrastructure as well. So I'm just saying, or Microsoft is just telling you that, you know what, please don't bother about all these things. Now I will give you something called, like, you definitely need a physical server. This is something that is not eliminated, but this physical server is, again, this is a cloud, so you're just renting the physical server, and on top of this physical server, there will be a virtual machine service. There will be things like the operating system, the softwares, and etc. Whatever that we have kind of discussing. Softwares and so on and so forth. But all the management of these things, like the underlying server, the virtual machine, the operating systems and softwares, the management of all these things is now taken care by Microsoft. Like you don't have to worry about it. It's taken now, or it's taken care by Microsoft, or let's say the cloud provider, in let's say in let's say in the form of Azure and etc. So this package together, like these things together that you see on my screen, is called a PaaS service. It's called a PaaS service, and this is a short form, and the full form of this is called Platform as a Service. So, in short, we call these as PaaS services, wherein all this backend infrastructure, whatever is there in your backend, is now taken care by Microsoft. The only thing that you, or the only thing that your team needs right now is just to write a quality code and take this code and dump it on, let's say, the service that is running in the backend. That's it. Whatever is the services that are running in the backend, like the infrastructure and everything, that's completely now taken care by Microsoft. This model of operation is called as a platform as a service, and this is gaining a lot of importance these days. Like it was earlier infrastructure as a service, wherein let's say you were responsible to create the virtual machine, managing it out, and etc. But no one really has a lot of time these days. I mean, no one really has a lot of time and patience, and also the level of expertise to go ahead and manage or do a micromanagement out here. That's where a PaaS service is actually taking a lot of advantage over something known as an IaaS or an infrastructure as a service. So, any questions still here, guys? Anyone? Any questions still here? Are we good? Are you all able to follow this out?
Can we take any
Yeah.
example on this SaaS or PaaS, for example, any it is like website or a Flipkart, any it's like
Again, if let's say you're talking about an example about Flipkart, I don't know what Flipkart is running in the backend. So I won't be able to precisely give you an example of a website out there. But in Azure, the example of an infrastructure as a service is a virtual machine. Now, these are services, these are not websites. These are services that are running in the backend. For example, a very classic example of IaaS is a VM that we are dealing with these days. Virtual net, virtual networks, network interface cards, operating system disks, all these that are user managed come as an infrastructure as a service. When coming to platform as a service, there is a service called Azure Web App, or also known as App Service. This is an example of a platform as a service. And when you talk about a software as a service, any software that you just go ahead and install on your computer without any customization. For example, web.outlook.com. You're not managing the software, rather, you're not customizing the software. You're just a consumer of the software. that service is called a software as a service. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Any more questions here, guys? Anyone? Any more questions before we move ahead? Okay, then what all do you get out here then? So virtual machine, yes, but you cannot manage this virtual machine. You cannot do an RDP inside this virtual machine. This is a virtual machine service that is running in the backend. This is all backend right now. You will definitely have a physical server from where the virtual machine is actually running from a particular region, and all this is exposed. So the virtual machine, the physical server, everything, sorry, everything is exposed using something called as an app service. And this is called as an Azure app service. And the Azure app service is nothing but an abstraction, or is nothing but a representation of the underlying layer. Meaning the Azure app service will be running on top of the virtual machine. So just imagine that this is an application that is running on top of virtual machine service. Just imagine that this is an IIS server that is running from an underlying virtual machine service. So you have a virtual machine service that is running in the backend. You cannot see it, you cannot interact with it. The only thing that you can interact as a user of Azure is this, which is called as an app service out here. So then how do we create it? Like what are the options, or what do you need to select while creating this out? So let's look at that. So I'll just go ahead and create a resource group firstly, and I'll just call this as app service RG. And you will need a location, so I'll just take it as East US2, and I'll say review and create. Firstly, I'm going ahead and creating something called as a resource group. And once I have the resource group, I'll go into the resource group and I'll say create. And since a long time, we said create a Windows to Server 2019 data center. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this option called a web app, also known as an app service. So I'll say go ahead and create this out. And this is the portal, or this is the visit that will help you sorry, that will help you go ahead and create the app service. And it's asking for a couple of details like the name of your subscription, the name of the resource group. So I am giving the name of the subscription as a free trail and the name of the resource group as app service RG. Post that, I'm saying the instance details. So it's just asking me what is the name of the app service. So what is the name of this particular server, or what is the name of this particular entity that is running from a backend virtual machine, or what is the name of the app service in short. So I'll say okay, fine, the name of the app service is something like dev website abc000. So the name should be unique, and as and when I give the name, it's automatically adding that okay, fine, it is dev website abc000 dot azure websites dot net. So it's just adding or it's just binding the entire name, and it's giving me something called as a fully qualified domain name. It's giving me something known as a fully qualified domain name out here, wherein it's telling that okay, fine, the name that you have provided plus dot Azure websites dot net will be the fully qualified domain name of your website. Okay, great. So it says the next thing it tells that okay, fine, you know what, I understand that the only reason that you're creating this particular app service is that I now understand that you have or you probably have a code like in some language, in whatever language, I don't care, in some language, whether it be .NET or whether it be Java, whether it be Python. So you will basically at the end of the day take this code and want to deploy it or want to publish it on top of this particular application. So in order to in order to publish this code, you will need some softwares that will support this code or that are required for this code to run. So can you tell me which code that you're installing so that I can install the backend software which supports this code, and all the softwares which support the code is known as a runtime. So runtime is, just imagine that runtime is a software that is running in the backend which will help this server understand what is your code. So runtimes are nothing but compilers. These are also known as compilers. So it says, okay, fine. Can you please tell me what kind of a code it is? So right now it's called a publish option, and I'm saying it's a code. We'll talk about what Docker containers are at a later point in time. Right now it's just asking you what kind of a runtime stack it is. And I will say, okay, fine, you know what? There are a couple of options out here called .NET 6, .NET 5, .NET 3.1, and you have Java, Node, PHP, Python, Ruby, and a lot of stuff. So I'll say to begin with, it's an ASP.NET 4.8. This is the runtime that I actually want. And finally, it says, okay, fine, great. So since it is ASP.NET 4.8, I'll install the runtime that is required for this code to run. So whatever is the software that are there in the backend, forget about it. I will go ahead and let's say install it on top of the service. You don't have to worry about it. But can you please tell me what is the operating system that you want? Is it a Windows or is it a Linux? And when we were creating a virtual machine service, when we said it is a Windows, then there were different flavors of Windows like 2019 data center, 16 data center, 12 data center, and etc. You don't have all these things here. It's just asking you two simple questions. It's just telling, okay, fine, you know what, is it a Windows or is it a Linux? Because an app service doesn't care whether it's 2019, 10, whatever it is, because the operating system is managed by Microsoft. Microsoft will manage all these things for you. So it says, okay, fine, great. So you selected Windows. Finally, it will just ask you what is the region of the world in which you want me to create the service in. As I just said, okay, fine, this is Central US. This is the region in which I want to go ahead and create. So this is what I've been dealing with right now. I I said what is the code, and accordingly what are the softwares, and I just said what is the OS. I just said what is the operating system. I also said what is the region. So these were the things that I kind of mentioned till now. So any questions still here, guys? Anyone? Any questions? Any
So,
questions still here, guys?
so
Yeah, go
previously
ahead,
you have
please.
created, yeah, yeah, previously you
Mhm.
have created a region east-west, right?
Right.
Now you are creating, deploying in central US.
That is fine. I mean, a region, I'm just because the reason I'm deploying it in central US is because I do not have sufficient quota in East US. Like I can also change this to East US. This is the it's not a mandate, so I can go ahead and change this to East US also. So no issues there. So I am just selecting a region of the world, imagining that my business is running there.
How could it is in, size? Those are all things. Windows. I mean, uh, it's
Okay,
internal.
so
How it? Mm,
you mean the size of this particular virtual machine?
correct. Disk space. These are all things. How it managed.
Okay, great question. So so very importantly, so the question was that you have selected the software OS and everything. I'm good with that region also. I'm good with that. But since it's a backend service, how does Microsoft manage the size of the virtual machine, this disk space, and etc.? Because for your application to actually run, it needs all these things, right? So how does Microsoft manage this up? Which is actually a very great question. Now, yes, this is a backend service. Do you get any option to go ahead and decide what is the size and etc.? You do in the form of something called as app service plan. This is where you decide things out, telling that what exactly is the size of the virtual machine that you, or this, what exactly is the size, the space of the virtual machine that you go ahead and create in the backend. So what exactly is this? So let's look at this. So I'll say app service plan. There is something called, or there is something very importantly called app service plans out here. And even these are individual resources. You can actually go ahead and create them out. So I'll just say app service plan. I'll just create this out. So I'll say it is app service RG. I'll say it is dev plan 01. Just giving a name, just giving an operating system. And I'll say EastUS2 or EastUS or whatever it is. And out here, there is something called as pricing tier. And it says SKU and size. And by default, I have a SKU called free F1 with something known as 1 GB of memory. That's it. It's just showing this much of information. Now, since I'm using a free trial account, I don't have an option to go ahead and change this here. But after we create it, we can actually go ahead and change this out. So, what I want to really highlight here is that you select the size of the disk, the memory, the disk space, and etc. in the form of something called as an app service plan out here. So, an app service plan that is running in the backend is nothing but a representation of the virtual machine service that you have. Meaning, when you are creating a virtual machine service, you had a lot of options to go ahead and create the size, or you had a lot of options to tweak. I mean, you had a lot of options to add the disks and etc. Now, for an Azure web app, you cannot go ahead and add a disk. For an Azure web app, you can only select or you can only choose something known as a plan size, which will essentially give you RAM, space, processing power, memory, and etc. So you only have this option out here. For example, I have an app service plan that is already created. So let me look into that. So after creating the app service plan will look something like this. And Let's forget about what scale up and all is. This is the option, or these are the number of options that is available once you have created the app service plan. Normally, when you're using a paid account, all these options are upright available, meaning when you're when you're creating the app service, all these options are presented to you, telling that what is the plan that you want to go ahead and create, or what is, let's say, the memory that you actually want, and so on and so forth. So there are three different options out here. One is called dev and test for development and testing activities. The other is called production. Third is called isolated. Now, if you look at dev and test, there is something called F1, which is called shared infrastructure, and this will give you 1 GB of memory, meaning 1 GB of RAM, and it's telling you 60 minutes of compute per day, meaning whatever website that you have running here will be allocated somewhere around 1 GB of memory, not more than this, just 1 GB of memory out here. And after the 1 GB of memory, I'll also give you somewhere around 60 minutes of compute, meaning your website on a given day will be running for 1 hour, not more than that, because this is a free plan. This is a free plan that you're selecting right now. I cannot give you more than that. Let's say you don't need a free plan, you want to scale up, meaning you want to go to another plan. You have something called D1. Again, same 1 GB memory, but right now you get somewhere around 240 minutes per day. So that's like 3 or 4 times greater than what you used to get in the earlier plan. So in a web app, a very important thing that you have out here is something known as the app service plan. And you cannot create a web app without an app service plan, because this app service plan is what which powers this particular application, or this app service plan is what which powers the underlying application out here. So does that answer your question, guys?
Yes.
And you now have, okay, let's go back and let's look into this. And you now have different varieties of app service plans out here. Like for example, you have something called F1, which is a free tier. Then you have something called D1, which gives you somewhere around 1 GB of memory and about 240 minutes of compute per day. That's like 240 minutes per, let's say, a day of application runtime. Then you have something called a B1, and right now you have something called 100 total ACU. ACU stands for Azure Compute Unit. This is like, let's say, the processing power, meaning this is the processor which helps you power your application. And the only thing that I want to just highlight out here is that greater the ACU, greater is the speed of your application. So if you have a 400 total ACU, it's really very fast. But as and when you increase from one size to the other, the price is almost getting double. So if let's say you go for a B1, the price that you pay here is 3,944. But when you go for B2, which gives you somewhere around 200 total ACU, the price is somewhere coming around 7,088, something like this, .96. So once you go from one plan to the other, the price is almost getting double. And of course, all these are something for called something known as a development and testing activities only, meaning Microsoft recommends these plans or these sizes for only testing your website. But let's say if you are a hotel industry again, and a lot of customers are visiting your website, Microsoft recommends something known as a production grade plans. So all these are production grades starting from S1, P1, V2, P2, V2, and etc. So on and so forth. Now, the greater the plan is, the greater is the price, and the greater is the memory, greater is the RAM, and you also get something called virtual CPUs and all these things out. So it's all about, let's say, what is the use case scenario that you want? Is your website being visited? Or if, let's say, I'm just a beginner, I am just a small industry. I don't need to spend so much of money here. I just need to see whether my business is starting or not. In that case, I can just use something known as a development or testing. If you are a website like, let's say, irctc.com, which is like a very heavy processing website, then Microsoft recommends you going for something known as a production grade level plans. There's finally something known as isolation. We'll talk about that once we create and get into it. So while the creation of web app, so this is the creation of web app. While the creation of it, you're just giving the name of the web app. You're just telling what is the runtime stack. You're just telling what is the location, and you're telling what is the name of the plan. Very, very important. And very importantly, both your web app and your plan has to be in the same region. So this one, which is the web app, and this one, which is the plan, they have to be in the same region. They have to be in the same region out here. You cannot have your web app in one location and the app service and the app service in the other location. It's just like a relationship between a virtual network and a virtual machine out here. So I am just selecting the web application right now. So I'm saying it is a couple of details that I'm filling out right now. I'm saying it is the resource group. I am saying the name of the web application. I'm saying what is the code that I'm publishing. I'm saying what is the operating system. I'm not talking about whether it's 2019 and everything. This is completely taken care of by Microsoft. This is an option that you don't have. You cannot go ahead and select whether it's 2010 or 1913, whatever it is. No, you cannot do that. This is now taken care by Microsoft. You get to select the region. You get to select what is the plan. Very importantly, the plan out here. So for example, let's say I call this as dev plan 01. And right now, if it's a paid account, you will have all these options that you're seeing here only. You can just select the size and you can change the size accordingly. But in a free trial account, you don't have it here. You can create and then you can change the size at a later point in time. That is allowed. So this is the first page. And secondly, you have something called as deployments. Let's disable this for now. And there is something known as, very importantly, called monitoring. We'll talk about it in a separate section when we do something known as alert and monitoring. I'll just say no. I'll finally say tags. You can give multiple tags out here, and I can say review and create and hit the create button out here. So what I'm doing is that I'm giving a couple of details like what is the name of the application, the code of the application, the region, and very importantly, the app service plan out here. Once these are done, I'm just saying, okay, fine, please go ahead and create the service out here. Any questions here, guys? Anyone? Any questions still here? Is everyone able to follow this, guys? Does anyone have any confusions here? Anyone, any questions? And once this is created, let's go into the resource group and let's refresh the resource group out here. Do a hard refresh of my browser. And this is what you will see. You will have an app service plan in place, on top of which you have something called app service that is running. This is the important entity. The plan that you see in the backend is something which powers your app service. So this is a backend entity which is very, very important. This is like, let's say, the processor, and this is the app service, or this is the actual app service which holds your code, hosts your applications, and so on and so forth. So if I go here and click on something known as the app service, I have a couple of options. So let's go ahead and do a very brief discussion about that. So in the overview page, I have things like what is the resource group in which this app service plan is actually situated in, or the app service is actually situated in. Then I have something called as a status, and it says your application is running, the location which you cannot change, the subscription ID under which this is present in, and there is something called as a URL. You have a URL, and if you look at this URL, it's https something dot 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 something like this, meaning this is the DNS name. Yesterday, when we were looking at a virtual machine service, all we got was an IP. That's it. We just got an IP of the virtual machine, nothing else. But when you look at this service right now, you are actually getting something called as a URL. So Microsoft in the backend is managing even the DNS. It's managing even something called as a DNS name. So if I just click on this link, it'll just take me to a very sample website, and it says your application is up and running. Meaning, when I created a virtual machine service, I had to install something called IIS on top of this virtual machine service, and only then it started to act as a web server. Now, app services that you look at this at my screen right now are by default web services. I did not go ahead and do any installation of, let's say, IIS. I did not do anything. They by default come as a web service that is running out of, let's say, a backend virtual machine from Azure. So all the software, meaning the IIS installation, etc., was taken care by Microsoft. As and when I said, okay, fine, please go ahead and create something called as an app service out here. And this is how I interact with the app service. For example, I can browse, I can stop the app service, I can restart the app service. Now, one very important thing that I want to highlight to you all is when you hit a stop button out here, it says, are you sure you want to stop? I'll say yes. It says successfully stopped, and let's refresh our screen. And if you look at this, the status is stopped, meaning you haven't stopped the underlying virtual machine service. The virtual machine is still running. You just stopped the IIS server that is running on the virtual machine. So these are two things, guys. One, you have an underlying virtual machine service in the form of an app service plan. You cannot stop this. You cannot do an RDP into it. You cannot do that. You can only interact with this layer called as the IIS layer or the application layer that is running from the virtual machine service. So you can stop this, you can start it. It's very fast. So even the start is like very fast right now. You see the website is running. You cannot change the region. You cannot do that. And how do you interact with it? Meaning, let's say I have something called as a HTML code. Now, how do I take the HTML code and put it on top of this website? To answer that, you need a software installed on your laptops. So I will give that to you all, something known as WinSCP. You have a software called WinSCP. We'll understand what the software does and how does it, kind of work. But for now, please go ahead and just download it and install it out. So this is the link of the installation. It's a very, very simple software, just like the way you install a VLC player or something like that. You can just download, double click on that, choose all the default options, and have the software installed. So this is as simple as that is. So any questions still here, guys? Now going forward, we'll look at how do you interact with the service, what do you do with this service, and how do you manage this service. This is going to be the agenda for the coming classes. Any questions still here, guys?
Kiran, actually, just now we have stopped the app service, right?
Hmm.
So in the same way, can we able to stop app service plan so that we may cut the cost, right?
You cannot do that. The thing is that you cannot do that. So that's what that's the trickiest part. You do not have an option to go ahead and stop the app service plan. This is a managed service. So for example, if I go into the app service plan, there is no option to stop it,
Okay,
because once you create this, right, Microsoft says that okay, fine, you know what, I understand you want me to manage all the backend. So no matter what, if you want to stop it, I won't give you an option to do that. But if you want to, kind of completely halt your website, you can change the size and get it to something called as F1. So F1 is a free tier, right? So even if the virtual machine, the backend is running, I won't charge you in that way.
okay,
Okay. So you don't have an option to stop this out.
okay, Kiran. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions, guys? Any more questions? Anything that I can take? Okay. So before coming to tomorrow's class, guys, please go ahead and install this software, which is called WinSCP, and download it and install it out. I'll help you out to understand how do you use it, what is the use case scenario, what is the purpose of it, and etc. And if there are no further questions, guys, we are good to close today's session, and we'll meet tomorrow at the same time and discuss more on the app services and etc. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.